Hello, everyone, and welcome to my 2022 NFLC Summit presentation. My name is Diego Ojeda, and I'm a Spanish teacher at Louisville Collegiate School in Louisville, Kentucky. I'm currently teaching Spanish for AP Language and AP Lit. But I have been teaching for a long time, for over 30 years. And during this time, I have been able to see many changes in schooling, many changes in the students, and many changes in me. And that's why I strongly believe in the topic of this presentation, how to make language learning real and relevant, which is the most important thing that we can do for our students as language and especially as a second or foreign language teacher. So today we're going to talk about making language learning real and relevant. I hope you enjoyed this presentation and that is hopeful. Hopefully it's good for you and important for your students. So let's get started. All right, so first, let's start with the definitions. So what is real? What do we understand by real? Well, according to the Merriam-Webster's dictionary, something real, let's understand real from its opposite. It's something that is not artificial. And when we think about artificial, we can contrast that with natural. So artificial is the opposite of natural. So real is the opposite of artificial. Something real is something that is not fraudulent or illusory. It's something that we can, let's say, prove, maybe by our senses or by our feelings. Real is also genuine. And this is the most important part as teachers. We must be real, we must be genuine to our students, okay? We must not be artificial. We must not be fraudulent. Okay, so let's go with, we must not be artificial, okay? So when we think about what artificial is, well, in the world language classroom, artificial acquires a different connotation, okay? Artificial is pretty much everything students want or can't find natural. And it can be anything. I'll give you examples later. But sometimes just because we are teaching a foreign language, we are trying to share things that our students are not familiar with, it starts sounding a little bit artificial, not very genuine, okay? But that doesn't mean that we cannot make it genuine or that we cannot make it real, okay? So what aspects of world language instruction seem artificial to our students? Because the moment they start feeling that what we're bringing to the class is artificial, they disconnect because we're working with languages and languages are live. So we need to make that connection between language and life. And when we talk about life, we talk about reality. We talk about the day by day of life. So it can be artificial when the language that we are trying to help our students learning is not used in context. In other words, we rely on a textbook, and that's 100% artificial to the students, to the teacher, to the class. We are just learning from the textbook. And sometimes if we just follow a curriculum, it doesn't matter if the curriculum has a textbook or not, if the curriculum is just a bunch of slides, if it doesn't connect with the student, it's artificial. It's artificial when the language that we use is only used to be it's only used to translate what we say in the student's native language. So sometimes we have these situations where the teacher says something, let's say in Spanish, "Hola chicos, ¿cómo están?" And immediately, "Hi everyone, how are you?" Okay, hoy vamos a hablar acerca de los deportes. And immediately, today we're going to start talking about sports. Okay, so that is artificial to our students. And besides, that doesn't require any type of effort from the students because they know that the translation is coming. It is also artificial when the teacher assumes kind of like an alternate personality, meaning that they are not themselves. And the students are really good to know who's a genuine teacher. So I understand that sometimes we want to be fun, that sometimes we want to look interesting to our students, but we really don't have to create an artificial character to connect them to the language and the culture, because to them that is artificial, and that can, you know, be very close to stereotyping, and that's not good. That's not good during language learning. It can be also artificial when in our instruction, especially the instruction that is based on stories, we just use many fictional stories that the students create with fictional characters, which is good, but not all the time, not during every class. Or when we just base our instruction in characters that come from fictional stories that sometimes are very not very credible. So I think it is important to work with stories that are real, with stories that are current, and with literature that is somehow based on the culture, on the community, on the language, and that has some kind of effect on the reader in order to learn more about the target language and culture. The class is artificial when we base it on cultural projects that only are giving information, factual information that students can easily find in Google. It's very artificial. You know, let's just talk about Argentina and how they dance the tango and how they love empanadas. Let's talk about this. Let's look at the slides. But when we don't make it experiential, when we don't make it real, when we don't bring the tango music, and when we don't ask our students to try to dance tango, and when we don't cook in the classroom, it's pretty much a bunch of information that can be interesting, but is going to be easily forgotten. Okay, when is language teaching or learning fraudulent? When we give false impressions, meaning, like, for example, why are we studying the language? Why is it so important to learn Spanish in the United States? Oh, well, sometimes we say, well, we need to learn this because this is part of the curriculum. Our school is invested in helping our students learning a new language, whatever language it is. So we must study the language because it's part of the school's mission or because it's just part of the curriculum. That's a little bit fraudulent, okay? Therefore, it's a requirement for you in order to graduate. We keep repeating these reasons. And I believe that we're not being very honest with our students because we really don't learn a language because of those reasons, okay? Or we say, well, we're learning this language because learning a language is quite important, and we leave it at that, okay? Sometimes we even say, well, you know, learning a language delays Alzheimer's. So we get very serious, okay? So you better learn a language right now if you don't want to have Alzheimer's at 35 years old. I'm sorry, we're being fraudulent when we do this kind of reasoning. Oh, we learn word language because it will be handy in the future for your job, okay? It's gonna help you escalate. It's gonna help you earning more money. We are trying to trick our students when we give this kind of reasoning. So we don't have to go there. I mean, there's so many real reasons. Well, and the most common one, we're learning a language because you never know when you're gonna be traveling to the target language country. You never know if you're gonna marry a lady from Guatemala. You never know if there's a war and suddenly we have to seek asylum in Mexico or Nicaragua. So it's kind of like we scare our students, so, you know, to convince them that it's important to learn foreign language, okay? I call this fraudulent and not real, okay? Now, remember that something that is not real can be illusory, something that deceives or misleads intellectually. So when we mislead our students intellectually, we are very close to the stereotyping a whole culture, okay? So when we use sombreros in the classroom, and I still see that, and I have colleagues from Mexico saying, I have no problems using sombreros in my classroom because sombreros are part of my culture. Fine, okay, that's fine. But are we explaining our students the story behind the sombreros, the meaning behind the sombreros, and how important to Mexican culture and people are the sombreros? Or are we just using them as props to have fun on a Cinco de Mayo celebration and not explaining really the meaning behind the sombrero? So when we talk about poverty and when we, you know, kind of like make statements like most of the Latin American countries are really poor, you know, people live in really harsh conditions, what is getting into their mind? For them, it's gonna be everyone in Latin America is poor. Latin America is just a whole, okay? And when we talk about corruption in Latin American countries, corruption. I think it's very important that, you know, as teachers, as schools, we also show them examples of corruption in world, you know, important and powerful countries, because it also happens. Corruption is worldwide, not just in the small countries from the target culture, okay? When we constantly are using expressions in the classroom, like, ¿qué pasa, cabeza de calabaza? And then the student thinks that this is the way people in Spanish-speaking countries greet each other. So when I bring them to Colombia, I'm right now in Bogota, Colombia, at a hotel, and I bring my students to Bogota, Colombia, and I introduce them to my family, and I say, hey guys, this is my dad, Ernesto. And then one of them says, ¿qué pasa, cabeza de calabaza? My dad is going to be like, what? How did he call me? Okay, so I'm not saying that it's not important to learn expressions or jargon, but to explain the context and when to use it, because otherwise we're just creating an illusion of how the world is. Another expression like nada, nada, limonada, okay? Or ay, 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 ay. Okay, to be honest with you, I've been teaching in the United States for over 23 years. And the first time I heard this expression, ay, 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 was in the United States. And my students seem to think that this is something that the whole Hispanic world, it's a way for us to express our feelings or whatever. See, so we got to be careful with that. We need to make it real. We must always strive for genuine, always. Doesn't matter if the teacher is the only genuine resource, as he or she is the most important and credible one. Now, genuine does not mean native. Be careful. If you're not a native teacher of the language that you are teaching, you can still be genuine 100%. Just be you, okay? And let's try to avoid those things that will make the class, or what we bring to the class, artificial, fraudulent, or illusory. Okay, now, a definition of relevant. So first, it has to be real, right? Now, it has to be relevant. So according to the dictionary, relevant means having a significant and demonstrable bearing on the matter at hand. So something that is meaningful, something that we can demonstrate. So whatever we do in the classroom has to have a meaning and has to have an immediate application. Okay? It's not that when you are in the middle of Madrid, this is what's going to happen. No, we need to make it relevant right away, right there in the classroom. Connecting our students with opportunities to actually use the language beyond the fake conversation. We spend just too much time creating fake conversations in our classrooms, just preparing to what is coming in the real world. When now these days, we have the tools to help our students use the language right away. Just think about an example, social media. This is a way they can use the language. Okay, my school doesn't allow us to use Twitter. Okay, fine. Then just take a look at a newspaper, target language country newspaper, target language country radio station. They have forums online where people can read an article and comment, and then they will get an answer. People will watch the news or listen to the news on the internet, and they can interact with the reporters and maybe with other members of the audience. Okay, so there's no excuse. There are applications where students can connect with people who lives in the target language countries, and they can easily practice the language that they are learning. You can make phone calls. Look for the telephone numbers of a restaurant, for example, and have your students asking for the prices or special type of food, or asking what time does the restaurant open, what time they close, or asking, do you happen to have fried chicken? Okay, but make it relevant to your students. Okay, all right, what I just said about social media. Definition of relevant. So relevant has to be practical and applicable, okay? But remember, the best connections always happen in person. So you were not able to do what I just suggested. Well, if you are a Spanish teacher, a German teacher, an Italian teacher, a French teacher, It doesn't matter if you're native or not. Chances are that you have friends from that culture or even family from that culture. Okay, invite those gals to your classes. Oh, well, I am in Kentucky and they live in Minnesota. I cannot bring them here. Well, bring them through Zoom, bring them through phone conversations, invite them to talk to your students. Invite your students to ask them questions in the target language, to real people. This is what really makes a difference in the class. It's relevant, okay? All right. You can do this also with people, for example, at work. At my school, we have people from maintenance who speak Spanish, a couple of them. So invite them to talk about their lives in front of your class, or go and visit organizations that work with immigrants in your community and be there to talk to them, maybe to help them, and to learn more about their lives. Make it relevant. Let's just make our class relevant. The ability of an information retrieval system to retrieve material that satisfies the needs of the user. Relevant, okay? We don't study the target language to pass the exam or the quiz or the test. We study the target language so we can communicate. But it's not just to communicate in a foreign language. That is wrong as well. Communication doesn't limit itself to languages. Communication is a universal thing. That's why we can communicate through gestures. We can communicate through attitudes. We can communicate with silence. So it is not necessary to speak the language in order to communicate, okay? We don't learn languages to communicate. We don't learn languages to pass the exam. We learn languages to understand the world, okay? All right. So how can we make world language instruction real and relevant to our students? Okay, as I was mentioning before, all interactions must be natural, not just based on what education should and has been, because education has been very artificial throughout history. They tell us it's important for them to participate. It is important that we assess our students in each one of those elements that constitute language learning. It is important for them to present and work in projects. It is very important that we design lessons that go with what education has traditionally been, okay? How natural are we when we just plan our classes with these things in mind? Just trying to satisfy the status quo of education throughout history. And maybe we forget a little bit about the real people who our students are, okay? For example, grammar should not be looked at after the fact. Should be looked after the fact, not before. Meaning, let's focus on communication, let's focus on relevancy, let's focus on motivating our students, and then let's analyze a little bit of the grammar, not before, okay? So every interaction must have a real context for the student, something they can see themselves as part of. And the first language can be used to start or to direct a topic or conversation, but not to reinstate what has been said in the target language. I talked about this before. We are not the human translators, okay? Let's make this natural, not artificial. Why? Because our students know very well the difference between non-authentic and authentic, okay? We do not have to be the very eloquent professor nor the clown. We just need to be ourselves. The difference between fictional, fantastic classroom created stories and real stories is that the real ones move us. They cause a reaction that is natural and therefore memorable. So when we bring to this class real stories, these are things that somehow can affect them, can affect their lives or the lives of the people that they know, okay? Instead of cultural projects, we must strive for intercultural projects as they involve the students. Meaning, let's not talk about culture starting from the outside. Meaning, today kids were talking about paella. And paella is a dish from Spain. No. Okay. If you know that paella has rice, and if you know that paella has shrimp, and paella has chicken, start from the world. And let's talk. Chicos, miren estos ingredientes. Look at these ingredients. Arroz, rice, chicken, pollo, shrimp, camarón. ¿A quién le gusta el arroz? ¿Cómo te gusta el arroz? ¿Te gusta el arroz chino o te gusta el arroz blanco? ¿Cómo te gusta el arroz? ¿A quién le gusta el pollo? Okay, so is there like a type of food dish in our community that involves these three ingredients? Oh, yeah, señor. Chicken and rice, okay? Okay, bueno, arroz con pollo, sí, pero ¿tiene camarón? Does it have shrimp? No, no tiene, okay? But initiate that cultural conversation from the students' world, not from the outside, then connect. Okay, so here, this is what we have, but in other countries like Spain, they combine that chicken and rice with shrimp, and they add this. Oh, wow, they put shrimp? Like, yeah. So then I tell them that I love my chicken soup. I love a Campbell soup that is like chicken soup with rice. And then I put a banana. I cut a banana and I put it in the soup and I eat it. And my students are like, whoa, that's gross, señor. Okay. So you need to start from their own experiences. And this is just a food example in any type of topic that you are covering with them. Okay, fraudulent versus honest. A real second language class doesn't need to explain why the second language is studied. The second language is used for communicative purposes, but remember that when we connect with the other culture, we can also communicate in different ways, you know, through gestures, body move, or different ways, but that's part of the culture as well. The curriculum is not an enough reason to learn a second language, okay? And to remind them that this world is a big world and that we're not by ourselves here, okay? All right, we don't learn a second language in order to make more money in the future. We learn a second or a third language so we can have more friends. But yeah, when you have, I'm not talking about like lifelong friends, lifelong friendship. No, I'm talking about being able to get on the street and say hi to someone or help someone in another country. You can make a 2-minute friend and you probably won't see that person anymore. But you have this feeling of like, you know what? I'm not alone in this world. And that person is going to have that feeling of like, wow, this guy seems to be from another culture, so kind. They said hi to me, okay? Making friendship, okay? Therefore, we can understand the world. Therefore, we can understand our own life. We don't learn a second language so we can get ready to travel. There is no need to travel to use our language in a real context, because to be honest with you, not everyone in that classroom that you have today will travel to the target language country. But chances are that they, at some point, are going to have an interaction with someone who speaks the target language, even in their own community, their own city. Illusory versus genuine. Cultural artifacts are not the culture. People are the culture. So this rush to decorate the classrooms, it's in vain, okay? The more I teach, the less I decorate my classroom. My initial years, I just, I believe my principal was just like fed up with me, because at that time we had Carlix and they had a lot of posters. So I had him buying posters, flags, and I put flags over the ceiling and everywhere. And I asked him to buy this and buy that. So my students came to the classroom. I was like, ooh, wow, okay. But I felt really good, because to me, I was sharing culture in a different way, till I realized that cultural artifacts are not the culture, that I am the culture. And again, you don't have to be native speaker of the language that you're teaching to be the culture. You just need to be genuine, okay? Cute expressions like nana, limonada are just that. But be careful, because sometimes those cute expressions can even cut or prevent real communication, okay? So definitions and applications of relevant in the world language classroom. Okay, so remember, something that is current, something that exists, we need to think about what is the student's reality. What's the reality? Is it school? Is it the city where they live? Is it the world? Is it their country? Is it themselves, interests, friends, family? So things that are relevant to them, okay? So we can connect what we're doing in the class to that real world experiences. Everyday concerns or activities. So this is what really moves our students. This is what really comprises the reality. Things like daily routine, like struggle to wake up, sometimes struggling or having success in their classes, the importance of breaks to talk with friends or just to chill, the importance of homework, how can that be stressful for them, if they work, anything that they do in their lives before bed. So we usually are used to these topics, right? And the textbook work with these topics, school, city, country, world. But in reality, the student's world is 10 times simpler, okay? So we need to think in terms of simplicity. So what are we going to talk in the classroom? Let's talk about the real things that affect and move them, okay? So that way we can behave and present in a way that feels truthful, honest, and familiar, okay? So my question to you is, are we enjoying what we do in the classroom? How do we connect with the students? Is this just a job? Or is this a life project? To finish, let's look at the student perspectives. So Elise says about being real and genuine in the classroom. I think A genuine classroom is when the classroom becomes a safe space, okay? Teacher must have a high level of comfort and approachability with the students. You need to trust yourself. You need to feel comfortable with who you are in order to communicate that to your students and in order for them to feel that comfort as well. Because we are mirrors. Students have to see Students have to see understanding a new language as their goal, not just memorization. That's what Elise says. Julia says, these are former students. Variation in the types of assignments or projects, not just always the same project, not always the same homework or assignment. Projects that show real applications. I said this before, but now Julia is saying it, so it's more important. Meaningful class begins in Spanish if possible. Okay. When we start a class with grammar, we usually have to rely on the first language of the students to explain some things. That just disconnects them 100% with the target language. Okay. Simeon, he says, we always talk about things that we're going in our lives. Remember, simple. See? So we're going to talk about how they struggle to get to school early today. Okay. Katie says, encouragement to meet native Spanish speakers. Yeah, because the moment you use the language in the classroom and you create all these genuine opportunities to your students, then you want to go and communicate with native speakers. Connect words with our lives. Okay. And Zachariah says, incorporate culture with language. We talk about doing that from the students' own culture. The language must be tangible, not simply something that we must learn. Tangible. I love this kind of thinking. Something that that I can explain, describe, use, relevant. And Lily says, be telling stories about your own life. Topic students actually want to learn about. Okay. Careful. And Will, when the class is able to speak comfortably, I believe I learn the language much easier and we can talk about anything. To finish, Gus, when we learn about inclusion in contrast to the recent government policies that seem to deter these ideas. Okay, yeah, we talk about the reality of the United States in this case. We talk a little bit about politics, immigration, racism. We cannot leave those topics behind, okay? So my friends, my NFLC Summit audience, let's stop teaching languages and let's start creating the right conditions for language to happen naturally in the world language classroom. Thank you so much. Once again, my name is Diego Ojeda in Louisville, Kentucky. If you have any questions, feel free to email me to diego@senorojeda.com. I'm on Instagram as SR_Ojeda, or you can visit my blog at www.senorojeda.com. Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to share something that I'm very passionate about. I'll see you next time. Bye. Adios. Ciao. Suerte. Bye-bye.